We're moving now on with Dr. Isaac Belbin, who is a specialist on Islam and is going to be speaking with us again about this responsible citizenship, but from that context, because we've had the Bondi issue, we've got the Royal Commission happening, we have the Abraham Accord that President Trump has been driving since 2020, I might add, so he's continuing on with those negotiations, yet we still have a major problem with the way in which we understand Islam. Welcome to the show, Dr. Isaac.
I'm very glad to be here, and thank you.
My pleasure. So what is it that we need to know? What knowledge do we have to have about Islam?
So look, I mean, I just want to preface this and say that when we're discussing these things, we're discussing the doctrine. We're not discussing individual peoples. And I myself went through a really long period of trying to reconcile how the doctrines of Islam can fit within a Western-style democracy. And the unfortunate place that ended up is that there are fundamental challenges that exist for having Muslim people live in a society. Not because they're bad people, but simply because the doctrines of Islam have perpetual commands to act and behave in certain ways. And a lot of those things can be rather alarming. So, for example, there is a line in the Quran that says that whenever you meet a person who is a non-Muslim, and the word for non-Muslim is kafir or kafir, people pronounce it in various different ways, but there's a line in the Quran that says, strike the neck of the kuffar whenever you find them, which means it's a perpetual command to violence and murder. Beyond that, as we had this Royal Commission process, the horrible and tragic events of Bondi that I'm personally connected to, unfortunately, and after that, the government came out and decided to label the problem as being gun control. And it was a moment where I lost absolute, total and complete faith in our government here in being able to deal with this issue. Any serious examination of the doctrines of Islam will show things like, for example, that the Quran, the Hadith, and the Surah, those are the three fundamental documents of Islam, have more anti-Semitic expressions within it by percentage than Mein Kampf, which was Hitler's book. And if we see what the results of Mein Kampf were, I don't think we want to allow a similar set of results to come here. But what it does explain is the incredibly strong affinity that the Islamic world had with the Nazi regime all the way back when they existed in the 40s, where a local Arab in the British Mandate of Palestine called Haj Amin al-Husseini actually went and visited Germany and would broadcast Nazi propaganda in Arabic and try to persuade Arabs to join the Nazi cause. And the shocking thing is that if you look into many societies in the Middle East today, you'll actually see an extraordinary level of popularity for Hitler and the Nazis. You'll see books being written, you'll see them do Nazi salutes and things of that nature, and it just is shocking to me that people allow themselves to be hoodwinked by outright deceit when people come and say things like Islam is a religion of peace. And I think it was George Orwell who said in his book of 1984 that Big Brother has won when he can get you to disbelieve the evidence of your eyes and your ears. And the history of Islam is massacre upon massacre upon massacre. And it's something that we want to try and get past in our modern societies. And if we want to be able to do that, we have to stand up to the threats that we're facing. Our generation are lucky in that we didn't have to go and fight and die for the freedoms that we get to live by. they were just given to us, and we had them and we were born with them, and so we don't understand how easily they can be taken away. My family's history comes from somewhere outside of Australia, where we saw just how easily those freedoms can be taken away, and then some. And so we're still extremely sensitive to it, and when we see it happening here, we don't want this sanctuary that we've been able to escape to be dominated and swamped by the same problems that have caused so much death and destruction overseas.
You mentioned right at the beginning of your conversation there, Isaac, that Islam and the Nazi movement worked together, if you will, or there were a strong influence for Islam to promote and create a movement that would make Islam perhaps more Western, if that makes sense, because being a European country, Islam Middle Eastern, is that sort of what you're trying to suggest there?
So not exactly. So Islam doesn't shy away from actually saying out loud what it's thinking, what the people are thinking of doing, why they're thinking of doing it. There's a website called MEMRI, the Middle East Media Research Institute, or something like that, and all they do is record things that are being broadcast in the Middle East and other places, and simply show us what they're saying. And all you've got to do is look at that to see what the dangers are that we're all facing here. But I mean, it's also something where if we go back to how did things shift from Islam being a very masculine, aggressive, warlike type mentality to the more of the victimhood mentality that we see the Palestinian Arabs and their supporters try and go with. It actually traces back to the Soviet Union, where the Soviet Union in 1964 invited Yasser Arafat and I think it was a couple of hundred other local Arab leaders, and they helped reframe the struggle of one of domination and genocidal violence as it was expressed from before the end of the Second World War right up until that time, and to reframe it as a struggle for independence and freedom so that they would look like the victims, even though their allies vastly outnumbered the Jewish people that were there. And so it's this achieving their goals by way of deception is one of the fundamental doctrines that we have in Islam. It's a thing called Taqiyya. And this is what makes it so challenging to even consider any sort of reform or adjustment to some of the more nasty parts of what's written in the Islamic doctrines, because Taqiyya makes it okay for any Muslim to lie to you and to everyone else and publicly, as long as it's in service of expanding the Islamic world. So, furthering their desire to conquer the entire world. Sorry.
That's all right. No, just that's really powerful. Taqiyya, we've heard it many times, and it's something that needs to be continued to be discussed, because it's not easy to take on the values and beliefs, or more importantly, an understanding of those values and beliefs of something we're not familiar with. And with Christianity declining over several decades, there's almost a blank slate in which Islam is able to be embraced in certain ways, because we've lost that essence of our own fundamental values, I suppose, in some respects. That aside, how does all of this, what you're saying here, sit with the Abraham Accord? President Trump in 2020 started signing up Middle Eastern countries. Would there be agreement with those Middle Eastern countries, and from what I've read of the Accord, that there will always be difference, but surely we can cooperate with that difference. Isn't that what we should be aiming for?
So look, absolutely, because that's the best chance that we've got in terms of international relations and dealing with Muslim majority countries and things of that nature. But I would like to point one thing out. They are called the Abraham Accords. They are not called the Abraham Peace Agreement or anything of that nature. And the reason is because Islam forbids Muslims from making peace agreements with Israel. And so that is a large part of why we've seen that constant genocidal intent from the Arab world against Israel as a nation state of the Jewish people. However, what we have seen in recent times is Israel has become strong. And the Islamic doctrines talk about this, and they say, when your enemy is strong, wait. And so one thing that Israel in its experience has been able to prove is that the way that you can survive in a Muslim-dominated region is to be able to be strong enough that they don't think that they can kill and destroy you. And when you get to that point, we will see that there are peace agreements that come out there. I think that people in the Western world didn't quite think hard enough about why the entire Arab and Muslim world, very famously in Khartoum in the 70s, came out with three big no's. No to peace, no to recognition, and no to negotiations with the State of Israel. And people just accept this as normal. But you need to ask, why do they have this rather extreme position? And the reason is, the reason can be drawn back to the doctrines of Islam with their need to never relinquish land that is one day theirs. And let me tell you, they still consider the Spain, for example, to be part of the Muslim world, and they will fight in any which way that they can to bring it back to being a Muslim country as it was when it was called Andalusia.
Look, the history is so important. We mentioned this earlier on in the show as well, that history is something that we don't know enough about. You talk about Spain, and here in Australia we're facing still the issue around Indigenous Aboriginals and land rights. It seems to be that all wars, sure, they have a religious base, but it's about land as well, or more importantly, it is about land. So the more we have people who are quite happy to just go with the flow and not think about things, or as I discussed with Peter Richardson and the NDIS, these handouts. Peter's just sent a text in and said, this has been going on for a long time and we're assisting and encouraging people to underachieve, and things like the NDIS go towards that. If we have underachievers, we have willing parties to succumb to whatever control lands in their lap. Is that what's happening?
Kind of. I think that the best framing that I've heard of it comes from Professor Gad Saad, who uses these two terms that I think help us understand how we're letting this happen. One being suicidal empathy, and the other being the parasitic mind. In the first place, we've had these parasitic ideas that on their own can have no life. They can only live in rich Western societies, and they will actually then kill their host as a parasite. And as a society, we've had a number of these things come through, one after another after another. And what has then happened afterwards is our kind and empathetic nature has been weaponized by people who'd like to manipulate us. So they show us photos of people who look innocent, who are suffering, and of course it's going to touch our heart. But that emotive way of trying to talk about things just never leads to a good result. And what we see here in Australia is that, as you said earlier, the love and the respect for our own culture has been diminishing more and more over time. I mean, we always had tall poppy syndrome in Australia from the time that I was a kid. I found it quite jarring that overachievement was actually looked down upon in this place. And I'm not sure if you've seen Pauline Hanson's movie, but in that, she rightly mocks the way that victimhood has been put in front of us as a virtue. That the more of a victim you are, the more virtuous you are. And they've been able to do that only because, as you say, the religious faith of the people in Australia has been declining over time, and they kind of don't believe in anything. And if you don't believe in anything, then all sorts of nonsense will come in and fill your mind. Nature abhors a vacuum. And so people who believe in nothing will find very quickly that people who really strongly believe in something will come in and dominate them, because those other people will care a lot more, and the ones that don't care will just silently go into the night.
Isaac, it's a terrific conversation we're having. I'm going to get you back, but we're going to get you back for a lot longer, because this is unfolding in a very logical and profound way. And you've just finished off with a comment that there are people who believe in nothing. And I think that's where we'll start next time, because how is it possible that there is nothing and nothing exists? So we'll start with what people believe, which clearly isn't nothing. There is some sort of belief there. And it may be self-defeat, as you said, suicidal ideation, things like that. Who knows? But I think that's a terrific start for next time. And you've certainly opened my eyes a lot more to the plight of our survival, if you will, to reinvigorate the values that we do strongly hold if we have the courage and the capacity to do so. So I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. I look forward to being back.
Terrific. Thanks, Isaac. That was Dr. Isaac Bilben, and we were discussing the issue of Islam, and there's certainly a lot to learn there.